This is the first ever annual virtual Roundtable Symposium. And I think as many of you know, the Roundtable has a symposium every year, and we will really miss this year seeing everybody in person. I think it's an event that we all look forward to. Despite being virtual, we still have amazing attendance. I see so many faces of people I haven't seen since the last Roundtable conference. And of the registrants, we have about over 130 registrants. And of those, about 2/3 are people who have attended the Roundtable in the past. And we have about 1/3 new participants, which is really exciting. So welcome to all old and new participants. So as many as you know, the Roundtable on the Crown and the Continent seeks to bring together people from diverse perspectives to share their stories and their work, and to collectively address some of the challenges that this landscape is facing. Challenges such as changes in the population, changes in the ways that people are using this landscape, and changes in climate, which are affecting all of us with new and unusual weather patterns. The Roundtable seeks to provide a safe space to explore these issues from the perspective of culture, community, and conservation. And we hope people can join our discussion with an open heart to have honest conversations around what's often tricky issues that impact us all. We do this work out of our love for this place and the spectacular nature that it holds.
Yeah, well, and I think it could be.
Let's see, Emily? Yeah. And hoping that our children and grandchildren will be able to enjoy it like we've enjoyed it. I've been on the Roundtable leadership team for about 8 years. I work for the Center for Large Landscape Conservation in Bozeman, Montana, and we act as the fiscal sponsor of the Roundtable. One of the most satisfying parts of working with the Roundtable has been sharing the table with our Crown tribal partners. They're active participants and leaders in this collaborative. And at this time, I'd like to acknowledge that the Crown and the Continent is made up of traditional, ancestral, and current lands of many indigenous people and tribal groups. Ancestors of the Blackfeet, Kainai, Tanaha, Salish, and Kootenay people were among the first to hunt, fish, and gather plants for food and fiber here. The Roundtable supports and advocates for the sovereignty of Native nations in this region and beyond. And if you're not familiar with the tribes who are the original caretakers of these lands, I urge you to learn more. And you'll actually be able to learn quite a bit from 2 of the speakers we have today. We understand that we have a great deal to learn from the people who have lived here for thousands of years. And we thank our tribal partners for generously and continuously sharing their knowledge with us. I'd also like to thank the leadership team of the Roundtable. Over about a decade of its existence, over 50 people have served at different times on the leadership team, and it makes the Roundtable what it is. Members are tribal, non-tribal, agency, non-agency, ranchers, hunters, avid outdoor recreationists, or simply people who love the Crown. Leadership team members serve voluntarily, and we're always looking for new enthusiastic leadership team members, so you should talk to us if you're interested in joining. So let me just go over a few technical aspects. We arranged this, this symposium as a call rather than as a webinar, and so we wanted to make sure that everybody could participate and talk. And so if you're not talking, please keep yourself on mute, and when you want to talk, hit your mute button in the bottom left corner. You can put your screen on speaker view or gallery view. Gallery if you want to see everybody, and speaker if you want to focus on the person speaking. And those are the dots at the top right of the screen. We have a chat function. You'll see chat at the bottom bar of your screen. And as you listen to the speakers, and if you have questions, please put your questions in the chat box. They'll show up on the side. And we have 2 people monitoring the chat box so that we can go back to these questions during our question and answer session. There's also a raise your hand button. Now that you have to click on participants at the bottom of your screen, then you can raise your hand and we can call on you to just ask your question in person. So we're hoping this will be very interactive, like our conference is very interactive. We are planning on recording this symposium, and if you're not comfortable with being recorded, you can just turn your video off and lurk in the background. Welcome to do that. The Roundtable hopes that you'll find the discussion today thought-provoking and inspiring. We'll hear from some great leaders around the Crown landscape, most of whom have been key to the development of the Roundtable over the years. Before jumping into our agenda, we will open this meeting with a prayer from Mike Brewstead. Mute, Mike.
Thank you, Melly. Okay. Get gonna exam to one koi. Kiwan kamo itapai Krista of Sinchak. Sagyu Kokana. Okanipio. Good afternoon. My name is Mike Brewstead. My Blackfoot name is Chief Bird. Ninapixi, the eagle. And I've been doing ceremonies for quite some time, you know, and through the whole protocol. I just didn't jump into it because we don't do that in the Blackfoot culture. We don't imitate. And this morning I smudged my sweetgrass using a coal. We don't put direct fire to the sweetgrass. And I prayed for this conference, prayed for people that I would see or hear today, that this sickness will not enter your homes. And I also prayed for my granddaughter. I'm going to a sacred Iniskim, a buffalo stone transfer ceremony at 6 today. And it's also going to involve a sacred paint ceremony. So those are the things that we still do, that we've been doing for thousands of years, I guess. So I will not say too much. I will pray for all of you, your families, a good winter, and that you'll see your own tracks in the snow. Because when you don't see our relatives and your kids' tracks in the snow, it's a sad feeling. That we see and have our footprints in the snow, first fall of snow. It's a good sign for us. I will pray now for all of you, and pray for yourselves in your heart, you know. And yeah, I'll even show my heart, you know. When I finish praying, go like this to your heart, and I'll say, I'm done. Go like that, acknowledging the prayer. Ayaw na pinato sa kag. Na kanato ito pinukay sa katsumata kag kanay gusto ko ikag. Hey, kag ito ka change ka sumat pinan kag sis ko inukat kag ko sa kinan. Amok sin kag bisa ta pinakanapi ko dan sta ino chief pinan og swat chief pinan kag mani pat the person. Amok skawach tam mix kag. O kikak no kupi po imukse ni kakak si po ikog mukse ugsit mi kakan kakan stop kakan kusin kakak akitam stuim spinna Nitsitapi minna no kos na jo ken kaksa kasa panis maka konno exo kustak maswag akitam ita kunika sia ni kak matomi kos o akitam sa po kato pinana ni kagis tuika. Oken genoeg tayaksi, pois pinanakita pitsi iachta. En nakakmatapie nakakamsuk sots tapit sumakan ni kakmakto tay. Iksum stak pinanis to na nakakanakanit si tap. Ako kakyo kako, o kakis ni ba sunan mokse. An nakakmatapyo ka. Ispom mo sa kima to sa ispatapyo kikak. Ai kagin kemukin na nispomukin akikuna suka kemukin na nispato o kene gino kan stinch katsumutak spato pio ikakiko sakinan o kika kaniksa ka pa apa pumakatu mitska kanis ni iniskim mitska nisotan akita ma pumaka ita ma pumoa o kene kana pio asun kamutan asipato pio sun kamutan. Thank you. Go like this. Yeah, you've acknowledged the prayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. That's the first time I've heard a virtual prayer beaming around the landscape. It worked great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, so I will briefly go through what our agenda is today, and then we will start in with our speakers. Our first talk will be from Patrick Holmes, who is a natural resource policy advisor and works in the office of Governor Steve Bullock. And after Patrick, we're going to move into a Crown Cafe. Anybody who's been to Roundtable conferences knows that this is one of the favorite parts of a conference, where everybody can kind of stand up and talk about what they're working on or what they're thinking about, what their issues are. We usually limit, little mini presentations to a couple of minutes, and we hope we can pull the same thing off virtually. Sean will manage that part of the symposium. After the Crown Cafe, Jeff Mao, Superintendent of Glacier National Park, will talk about tourism and how it's changing. And then we'll have a second Crown Cafe. So if you get inspired by the first, you can jump in on the second. After that, we'll have Dr. Leroy Littlebear, a scholar from Lethbridge, University of Lethbridge, and Mike Brewstead will take the floor after Leroy. And Mike's from the Kainai Environmental Protection Association and University of Lethbridge. And at the end, we'll have the question and answer that will be moderated by Sean Johnson. And again, that's when you will either put your questions in the chat box or raise your hand on the participant tab. So with that, I will introduce Patrick Holmes. Patrick is a natural resource policy advisor to Montana Governor Steve Bullock, a role he's held since 2017. Prior to joining Governor Bullock, Patrick served as the Chief of Staff and a Senior Advisor to the Undersecretary of the Natural Resources and Environment at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. He worked on policy spanning issues in the Forest Service, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and climate change strategies for farms, forest, and rangeland. And today, Patrick is going to talk about building climate resilience in Montana and the Montana Governor's Climate Solutions Plan. Patrick, welcome to the Roundtable Symposium.
Thank you, Millie, and thank you all. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. And I just wanted to say at the onset that on behalf of Governor Bullock and our office, our hearts and best wishes are with you all and your family as you're working through managing this global pandemic. I'm excited to talk to you today about one of three collaborative efforts that we've been working on here in the Governor's office for the past year. But I did want to briefly just highlight the other two in case they may be of interest to you all, since they span work related to the Roundtable. The first is on wildlife conflict and specifically grizzly bear conservation and management. And we recently issued a report of the Governor's Grizzly Bear Advisory Council. Sean Johnson, member of advisory board, member of the Roundtable, was instrumental in facilitating that effort and knows it quite well. But for those who work on those issues, I'd certainly encourage you to tune into that work, and we'll be continuing efforts around implementation soon. The other effort I wanted to flag for you is on forest management and restoration and the revision of a state forest action plan. That work is going to be presented to the public for public comment later this week. And certainly for those of you who work on those issues or related topics, we'd welcome your input and engagement around that as we bring those efforts to a close. So today I'm going to talk to you about the Governor's Climate Solutions Council and our recently released Climate Solutions Plan. In each of these efforts, we were trying to build on some past work, institutionalize a few things, and really set the table for future policy efforts in our state and in our region. The Governor initiated the work around the Climate Solutions Council because he believes there's an immediate and urgent need for the state to plan for the future and prepare our communities and our economy. Already our state is 3 degrees warmer than it was several decades ago. We have earlier spring runoffs that are causing water variability and flooding. Those earlier runoffs are contributing, along with extreme temperatures, to more frequent, more severe, and larger fire seasons. In 2017, our state saw our largest fire season since the big burn of 1910, and it spurned periodic waves of evacuations. It curtailed visitation across our region. It prompted twice the incidence of respiratory ailments in many of the affected counties, and respiratory-related ER visits, I should say. And as this 2020 season has underscored, the smoke and fire impacts are felt regionally associated with these efforts. Many of the impacts of climate don't stop at our fence lines, and they don't recognize our jurisdictional boundaries and are indeed common to our region as a whole. And they're projected to grow far more worse and severe over the coming decades. But one thing I want to emphasize in framing this work for you is that climate change doesn't just pose physical risks to our health and safety. Our region's businesses and economy face a series of economic and financial risks associated with climate change. We have shifting energy demands and policy changes that are prompting transitions across our region, impacting many of the markets we serve traditionally. We have institutional and private investors signaling risks in certain areas and growth opportunities in others. And in small towns and in communities across our state and our region, many people are caught in the crosshairs, workers, community members, and others, often lacking the expertise and the economic capacity to respond to those changes. The last thing I'll say is climate change also creates fiscal risks. And as our 2017 fire season demonstrated, when we lose core revenue associated with certain revenue streams, and then we have significant impacts, that can put our state's core services and programs in jeopardy as well. So planning for climate change can help us manage these risks and costs tied to transitions and significant events. But it also offers insights into how we can develop some competitive advantages and local economic development strategies that put our region at the forefront of new energy and technology solutions. So just as we share many of the physical and economic risks tied to climate change across our region, we also have within our region a capacity individually, collectively, to respond in ways that ensure our long-term health, our prosperity, and our partnerships across the work we do. There's a saying in wildland firefighting that no one cares what color the engine is. And what that means is that faced with imminent threats when a fire is bearing down, we respond with urgency and with a seamless, coordinated approach across local, state, provincial, federal, and tribal nation partners. And amid the risks to climate change, some folks have suggested that maybe we should take on the vocabulary and the language of a climate emergency or crisis. And certainly amid some of the tragedies we've seen in the Northwest this year, that vocabulary and language may be appropriate for signaling heightened alarm. That said, more than inciting panic and underscoring the looming challenges that we're faced with, I think that language can be helpful to us in so much as it allows us to focus on planning, preparedness, response, recovery efforts, and to adopt that same seamless, coordinated, all of government and all partner approach to how we address the issue of climate change, similar to the way we respond when we're pressed with wildland fire. Needless to say that the strength of our partnerships, both among public and private partners and across the region, are a real asset as we tackle this big and complex issue of climate change. In Montana, the council benefited immensely from climate planning efforts that many of the Roundtable partners have already established, notably the work of the Confederated Salish and Kootenay tribes, the Blackfeet Nation, the city of Whitefish, our two provincial partners, and others. And early on, we recognized that communities have their own needs and their own capacity to tackle these issues. And as we approach the statewide perspective, it's all the more important that we be thinking about how we can complement and support those local efforts and how they can scale and integrate across our region. So the Climate Solutions Plan itself is the culmination of a dialogue and a series of deliberations that's occurred over the past year. The recommendations reflect strong alignment among a very diverse group of council members, while also highlighting some key points of disagreement that we think are important to articulate for others moving forward. There are over 50 different recommendations in the plan, 40 of which would achieve the consensus of the council members, which we think is a really noteworthy foundation for this work moving forward, in light of the fact that in the past many have viewed this issue as divisive. The recommendations themselves span a mix of state programs, policy, utility regulatory policy, incentives, federal policies, and many university and business and local partnerships. They build from our experiences here in the state, but they're complemented, as I mentioned before, by tribal nations, the experiences of others across our region and around the world. For the first time, they introduced a set of recommendations on workforce and community economic development that we feel bring a really important set of priorities to the work around climate change that I want to highlight for you as well. So I'm going to briefly just cover just a few of the recommendations today, but I do want to invite you all to view the whole report at your convenience. And certainly now, if you have time with your screens in front of you, it can be found at deq.mt.gov/climate. Again, that's deq.mt.gov/climate. So chapter 1 of the plan focuses on recommendations that I think will be most relevant to the group in the roundtable. They're really focused on how we prepare our communities, infrastructure, and our natural resources for some of these anticipated climate impacts. The most important component of those recommendations focuses on establishing what we're calling the Montana Climate Solutions Network, an effort to convene state, local, business, tribal nation, NGO, university system partners, and others to help provide timely and relevant information and coordinate services to meet the needs of our state and beyond. This network, as envisioned by the council, will have kind of 4 core functions that I wanted to mention for you. The first is to develop locally relevant climate data and assessment. We're very fortunate to have the Montana Climate Assessment led by the Institute of Ecosystems at Montana State University, the Montana Climate Office at the University of Montana, and others in our state that have been working hard to provide climate science on historic variability and past trends, and projections of future impacts in areas such as agriculture, water availability, forestry, and wildfire, as well as a forthcoming assessment that we're excited about on human health and climate change and the impacts there. The foundation for preparing our communities for the impacts of climate change is really having that ongoing work to develop good, sound science data and information. But it's also to translate that science and data information into usable formats for businesses, for land managers, for individuals and others. The council envisions one of the core functions of this network is sustaining and growing this scientific foundation for climate data for our region. The second is much like the work of the roundtable, focused on peer learning and planning support. As more municipalities, counties, tribal nations, and others undertake adaptation efforts and mitigation planning, there are significant opportunities for us to convene cohorts, to learn from one another, to develop best practices, to avoid reinventing the wheel, and help ensure that what we're doing locally really scales up to have regional level impacts. So a second core function of this network is going to be that peer learning piece. A third component is around jointly developing funding for this work. We know it takes dedicated staffing for communities to plan, to augment their own capacity, to have the resources to convene partners, and we're looking into how we can best fund those efforts. And in that same vein, a final and fourth core function of this network is going to be envisions the development of a Resilience AmeriCorps program that can bring young and old talent and address staffing needs that arise from the network and and its local partners across our region. The balance of Chapter 1 focuses on a variety of different recommendations that focus on protecting our built environment, our outdoor recreation, our tourism economy, our water resources, and our wildlife habitat from climate impacts, and a variety of strategies to advance that work. I'm not going to dwell on those for too long here. I did want to emphasize one particular area, which is the significant opportunity we see to work with working landowners across our region, our farmers, our ranchers, our forest landowners on climate solutions. Many of them are already at the forefront of developing innovative practices on their landscapes using a range of voluntary and incentive-driven tools. And we think that there are significant opportunities to help them do more. Many producers are adopting soil health practices in particular, be they through improving grazing or better managing conservation tillage or no tillage into their operation systems, or adopting other efforts like cover crops. And Montana is a leader in each of those areas where very small amounts, even increasing a small amount of organic carbon in the soils, can increase the water holding capacity of those soils. And at the same time, reduce inputs for fertilizer and pest control, and improve bottom lines of operators. So that is one of the opportunities we see where we can not only help prepare our producers for impacts from climate change, we can help increase soil carbon capacity, and we can also improve the profitability of operators so that they continue to manage on the landscape. It's the type of win-win-win that we see when we really work together on these issues. Chapter 2 of our report focuses on a broad range of strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in line with some goals that Governor Bullock outlined for us of achieving greenhouse gas neutrality in our power sector by 2035 and economy-wide at a date that was determined by our council of 2045 to 2050. There are a number of efforts that focus on energy efficiency, one of the most cost-effective ways for us to reduce emissions, and expanding the use of renewable energy and electrification of end uses. I won't go into detail on those components of the plan, but certainly welcome your interest in further discussion about how we can advance shared priorities in that space around climate mitigation as a region as we move forward. And the last chapter of this report, as I mentioned earlier, focuses on workforce technology innovation and community economic development strategies. We think it's a really exciting opportunity as we respond to many of the changes we're seeing in our region for our state to begin to develop leadership and how we respond. And the council, one of the core recommendations that they've made is the development of a series of local innovation hubs where we can build partnerships across existing businesses and help grow new ones. In many places we have already existing connected supply chains, partnerships with applied research in our university system, and unique ability to translate that into new technology and advancements that both create economic opportunity and help us address many of the challenges we're faced with as we cope with climate change. They range from efforts in our Northern Great Plains focused on precision agriculture technologies, to efforts in Southwest Montana where we see an evolving opportunity to be a regional, national, international leader on the development of renewable hydrogen, both for power and for potential transportation and other applications, to the advanced use of wood products, where we can use engineered wood products to replace other products like steel and concrete that have higher emissions potentials and offer many of the climate adaptation benefits that can help prevent large-scale wildfire. So I invite you all to look at some of those recommendations. They complement many of our efforts across this plan to really strengthen community-based support, to recognize tribal nation leadership, and to find ways in which we can complement and further support that leadership, and again, to find ways in which we can work together to solve these issues. When the governor issued the report, he called on Montanans to look for opportunities to work together to further its implementation. And certainly we would welcome those ongoing conversations with you all across this region on the opportunities you see to work together around component parts of this plan. So with that, I'll close and turn things back to Melly, and I'll look forward to your questions later in our time together.
Thanks so much, Patrick. Wonderful to hear about the work you're doing, and partnerships are indeed key to tackling the climate crisis. When I first joined the Roundtable in 2012, climate change was considered too divisive for the partners to talk about, and here we are, everybody talking about it. So it's really great. Thank you. Sean, you want to take it away?
Yeah, glad to. Thanks so much, Patrick. That was great. It was really good to hear about all the work that's been done, from grizzly bears to forest management to climate change, and just thinking about the breadth and range of topics that the council talked about and ended up being a part of that report is really inspiring. I hope people have a chance to follow that link and take some time to review the report and to really think about the challenges and opportunities that we face both within Montana, but across the region and even broader. I think climate is something that really does impact all of us. Obviously, one of the things that stood out to me was thinking about not just the information that's in the report, but how we do the work, and the idea that there can be a network of people moving forward that continues to think about these issues seems really critical to just continuing to build information, share lessons, and really explore what's possible and seek out those win-win opportunities. As Melly noted at the beginning, we're going to hold questions for the end, but if you guys have questions that you've captured as you were listening to Patrick, go ahead and throw those in the chat box. We'll take a look at them. We'll try to get to as many as possible. And also, just without the in-person live event feel of a conference, it's kind of hard for us to all share our gratitude to Patrick in the same way. But you do have a little button at the bottom here, so if you want to hit your reaction button and do a virtual round of applause, I think that'd be really appreciated, and really signal how much we appreciate the time that went into the council's work and to the leadership that Patrick's providing to the state and to all those who are part of that conversation. For those that I don't know yet, and it's great to see so many familiar names and faces on the screen today, my name's Sean Johnson, and I'm with the Center for Natural Resources and Environmental Policy at the University of Montana. And I've been a part of the Roundtable on the Crown of the Continent since the first annual conference in Waterton way back in 2010. One of my favorite things about the Roundtable, and I can't remember, I was trying to remember if we started it at that first meeting, is this idea of what we call the Crown Cafe. It's an opportunity for learning and for sharing and to really celebrate the different work that all of us are doing throughout the course of the year that connects to our communities, that celebrates this landscape, that connects us as people who really care about this landscape. It's a chance to have every voice in the room heard by sharing a brief update, a success, a lesson learned from the past year. And in a conference setting, we always pass around a mic and everyone has 30 to 60 seconds. And I usually run around and get a good workout doing that, which is good for me to get up and about. Wish we could do that via Zoom. But for this setting, we're going to need you to go ahead and raise your hand and be called upon. And what I'll do is call on as many of you as would like to share a brief update with everyone else that's watching today, or who may see a recorded version of this as we post it online afterwards. So if you have a brief, I'm going to say, 30, 60 second, Melly was going to give you up to 2 minutes. We'll see, update. A success, a lesson learned you'd like to share, please go ahead and raise your hand now, and we'll start to see who wants to share something. And if you don't remember how to do that, you click on the participants field at the bottom, and it should give you a raise your hand option below the list of participants once that button pops up. Once you're called on, go ahead and share your name, your affiliation, and your hometown, as well as your brief update. So for example, my name's Sean Johnson. I'm with the University of Montana. I live in Helena. And this past year, I've had the opportunity to team up with colleagues around the country to start developing a collaborative leadership program that focuses on providing knowledge, insights, examples, and skill building opportunities for how collaboration can be an effective approach to solving complex issues in a way that benefits our communities, sustains our landscapes, and honors our cultural diversity. All right. So I already see a number of hands raised. This is great. So let's go ahead and jump in. We'll get to as many of you as possible in the next 10 minutes or so, and then we'll return after Jeff's presentation for another round of the Crown Cafe. And just remember to unmute yourself when I call on you. And if you want to share both your video and your audio, go ahead and unmute both of those. So Monica Field, you were first to raise your hand. It's good to see your name on the screen here. Go ahead and unmute yourself and share your update.
Are we unmuted?
Thanks, Sean. We're unmuted. So actually, my husband David wanted to give our update with what we're dealing with. And so he can introduce who we are and what we're working on.
Monica's just recently retired, and we're sitting in our home, and we're just concerned people. We've been with the Crown for attending roundtables for, I guess, about 10 years. We can't quite count the number, but probably just because we can't quite count to 10. So I think that's the magic number. We're coming to you from southwestern Alberta, and we're on the eastern flanks of the Livingston Range, somewhere between Waterton Lakes National Park and Banff. It seems like I always come with concerns, and today's big concern is that the province earlier this year opened up the eastern slopes, the Front Ranges, to those of you in Montana to open pit coal mining exploration. But we have a huge concern in the headwaters that are right behind us. And one company has been working at this for a number of years in an area. This is in addition to what's just been opened up, but that proposal is going forward to the public. And just yesterday, I sent to the Crown and to Dr. Little Bear and a fair number of other people my submission in this for the hearing dealing with that. We have concerns with our water, downwind, everything. And the potential here would be for Alberta to, on the eastern slopes, look much as southeastern British Columbia does in and around the Fernie area. So that's the picture, that's the story, and we're concerned. That's it.
Well, thank you guys so much. It is good to see you, and certainly appreciate you bringing that concern forward to the rest of the community. Going to go ahead, just in the interest of time, and jump to our next Crown Cafe participant. So going to hopefully get the name right here, Joseph Leviska. You want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Hey, yeah, thank you very much. My name is Joseph Leviska, and I am here with Wild Rockies Field Institute, as well as Montana State University. So I am here with my students at MSU. We are in a class called Bioregional Leadership, which is a special topics class that's brand new this semester. And I just wanted to introduce my students to you all and you all to my students, and thank you for really reflecting a lot of our course content in systems thinking and resilience on a bioregional scale. So we're working through that all semester, and the work that you all are doing is central to our study in Montana. So we're focusing on the greater Yellowstone ecosystem in particular as an example, but I think there's a lot of crossover there. So thanks very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Joseph. Appreciate you saying hi and introducing your students and your class and the relevance to the studies you're doing. So great to see you all, and we'll see you hopefully in person in a year. All right. Mike Brewstead, you've got your hand up. You want to unmute yourself?
Okay, thank you, Sean. Similar to Monica and Dan, I wear 2 hats all the time, maybe 7 sometimes. I also, I am one of the co-chairs for KEPA, Kainai Ecosystem Protection Agency, and also the Indigenous rep to Man Watershed Council. And the whole thing about the Benga, I think that's what it's called. I don't have had my form, I think it's my other desk, regarding this open pit mine right at the headwaters of the Old Man River. And again, this is it's kind of bringing to the forefront even our own board on Old Man Watershed Council. It was passed 9, 4, 2 abstained, and 4 voted against it. the water study and the impact. And that's what we're all about on the Old Man Watershed Council. And so we'll be presenting a brief, or our administrator and executive, and even among our own board, it has created a division. It's almost like it's no longer a board where you just come to a meeting and, you know, raise your hand, this and that. Now this is a real situation. I voted against it, and I'll make it public. I'm worried about the concern of the old man. I just live upstream about 3 miles, Valley River, the mouth fork of the old man. But Leroy, Dr. Littlebear, myself, and the group are trying to bring back the buffalo. And we're going to be maybe drawing water out of the Old Man River. So if it's going to be contaminated or has lower quality and it's not good to drink anymore for even animals, that's going to impact our buffalo herd that we've been negotiating for the last 2-3 years, and at the threshold of tribal council fully approving it and funding it. It's going to impact our water for our new herd of buffalo that we want to bring in by next year if we need to draw water to fill the dugouts there. So I'm not going to say we, but I have a serious concern on both fronts. And I understand our tribal council aren't openly supporting it. They've indicated they may not support it, but they're not for it at this time. And so that's going to come to head, and it's dividing our board on the Old Man Watershed Council. So it's like true colors coming out, fire there, and it's going to have a lot lasting effect. And I suspect any other group all the way upstream to Old Man. So I just wanted to share that with you, being right, I wouldn't say right at the head, but Old Man Watershed Council, we're the body that does the oversight for the Old Man water system. And it's, 9 against, and or 9 for, 2 abstain, and 4 against. And the 4 are really adamant, and it's getting personal, attacking our administrator. And we're wondering, okay, then my question is to them. Tomorrow we have a meeting. I'm going to bluntly ask them, then what are you people on this board for? Because our mandate is listed there, why we joined the board. And like I say, true colors come out. So I just want to quickly share that. I could go for 5 hours, but.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that update. Let's do a couple more. I see 3 more hands here. If we could just do 1 or 2 more, and then we've got another round of Crown Cafe coming up after Jeff's talk. So it'll be a nice way for us to punctuate our presentations with these updates. So let's do Emily and Candace just now, and then we'll take a break and come back with Juliet and others. So Emily?
Hi, everybody. I'm Emily Harkness. I'm with the Heart of the Rockies Initiative and the High Divide Collaborative, and I'm coming to you live from Whitefish, Montana today. I honestly, I just wanted to share, so I help coordinate things for our collaborative in the High Divide region. So if you just bump south of the Crown, we sort of cover that Southwest Montana, East Idaho area. And one of the projects we've been working on lately is our Forestry and Fire Working Group is co-hosting a free virtual Aspen workshop. So it's called Aspen in the Northern Rocky Mountains, but I guess if you're in Canada, it's probably the Southern Rocky Mountains to you. But I was just gonna put up a link for that. It's a way we're gonna be sharing a lot about monitoring considerations by example. So how, if you're at all involved in forestry or any other sort of resource management, it'd be great to have you there. We'll be looking at different monitoring examples and learning some basic Aspen ecology, and it is free, and I will post a link in the chat box. I'm happy to be here, and hi to everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. Really appreciate the update and the link to more information. And I guess it's great to see everyone's faces and hear your voices. But if people do have just a quick link or an update they want to share in the chat box, that's another opportunity too. So let's hear from Candace, and then we'll take a break from Crown Cafe round 1 and hear from Jeff Mao. So Candace, do you want to unmute yourself and share your update?
Hi, Sean. Hi, everybody. My name is Candace Paticki, and I'm the BC and Yukon Program Director for Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Initiative. And I am in the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa people and the Sinixt people in Nelson, British Columbia. And I just wanted to share a good news story about highway connectivity in the Elk Valley. For, of course, many years, as many people will know, folks have been sort of sounding the alarm that Highway 3 is a fracture for wildlife connectivity in the Crown. And there's been lots and lots of science to identify where wildlife is crossing the road safely and unsafely. And we've been working for several years to get the attention of the BC Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to start actually building some wildlife mitigation infrastructure on Highway 3 in the Elk Valley. And I just want to let folks know that we've been successful in taking some really important first steps. We've got the ministry signed on to build 9 different pieces of infrastructure between Elkford and the Alberta border. They have designed a 50-meter wide overpass that would span Highway 3 and the railway there. So that would be the first major wildlife overpass built in British Columbia, because the ones in the parks that people might be familiar with are actually in Canadian national parks. They're not actually in British Columbia. So this would be BC's first major wildlife overpass, and it would be situated at Alexander Michel, which is just west of the BC-Alberta line. So super important for wolverine, grizzly bears, lots of other critters, but particularly those 2 species. And then there's going to be 8 other bridge retrofits and potentially some other smaller overpasses built. So it's probably an $18 million project. We've got about $500,000 in the bank so far, and it's gonna take a while, but it's really wonderful to have the BC committed to that. So some good news for connectivity. Thanks.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks for the update and for sharing some good news. And thanks to everyone that shared during this first round. I feel like I've learned a lot already, and it's great to see how representative we are of the entire geography. So it's good to see people from BC, Alberta, Montana, down the Yellowstone ecosystem as well. So we're off to a good start. For now, back to you, Melly.
All right, thanks, Sean. Sean promised us that this would work, and it seems to be going well. We have 88 people sharing this conversation, so thanks for stepping up and talking. Okay, Jeff Mao, you are on the screen, but I hope you're there in person as well. Jeff arrived in Glacier National Park in 2013, where he is a superintendent. He's a 31-year veteran of the National Park Service, serving 21 of those years in Alaska. Most recently, he was superintendent of Kenai Forge National Park, based in Seward, and in 2012 served as the acting superintendent of Denali National Park. Jeff's other assignments have included serving on the U.S. Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, serving as a congressional and legislative affairs specialist for the National Park Service in Washington, D.C. Early in his career, Jeff learned the value of community service and has served as a Rotary Club president, mayor of Alaska's smallest incorporated city, a community EMT, a volunteer firefighter, and most importantly, on the leadership team of the Roundtable. So Jeff is going to talk about the future of sustainable tourism in the Crown of the Continent. Welcome, Jeff.
Great. Thank you, Melly. And let me share my screen here. Let's see, that's the one I want to share. And we'll get this going. Great. Well, hopefully everybody can see my screen. And let me know if you can. But it's great to be here in this virtual setting. I think we're all sort of getting better and learning about what it means to substitute these in-person meetings that we normally have. Certainly miss those, the sharing, the fellowship that goes on at these. But we're making do as best we can during these COVID times. My talk today is about sustainable tourism in the Crown of the Continent. And needless to say, COVID had a huge impact on tourism and certainly questions the issue, what's sustainable about tourism in this light. And so let me just sort of jump into it to talk about, again, the neighborhoods that we all live in, that we all work in and share, and tourism is a big part of it. We know that You know, I'm told that Glacier National Park generates about $400 million of visitor spending outside the park. So it represents a pretty big segment of our economy and you know, of enjoyment for a lot of people. And it's pretty significant that we look at that. But I think, you know, again, we struggled for a number of years about this issue of sustainability. How do we balance being such a popular venue for so many visitors from around the world, this year more so from throughout the lower 48, and, you know, preserve the resources and, you know, provide a great visitor experience. So it's not always easy. And
Hey, Jeff,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt. This is Sean. I just wanted to let you know your slides were appearing in presenter view instead of full slide view.
Okay, let me see. So it's still showing.
It's still showing presenter view there. If you go to display settings there at the top, that might be able to.
Swap presenter view and slideshow. How's that? Does that change that?
Yep.
Okay, good. Interesting. Okay. So yeah, you know, sometimes even for our wildlife, it can be very challenging, you know, with this busy situation without the number of visitors. We've tried to find some balances there. We're having to close trails. This is the Hidden Lake Trail, and some of you may know that we actually had to close it because we had a young bear, 2-year-old bear, that was chasing goats and around in this area where so many people were, and in fact, you know, was actually chasing visitors at one point. So we get into these conflicts between our resources and our visitors when things get so popular and heavily visited. Glacier National Park has been on a significant trajectory of increased visitation for a number of years. Last year was the second busiest year on record for the park. And in fact, the month of July last year, we actually had more visitors in Glacier National Park than Yellowstone did, which I can tell you is not supposed to happen. There's absolutely no way Glacier National Park was designed to have more visitors than Yellowstone. One of the great challenges I think we have in the crown of the continent is just how steep our visitor season is. And this is just a graph showing our seasonal visitation, and you see that so much of our visitation is concentrated in the months of July and August. And, you know, and I look at some of my peers at Zion National Park, for example, in Utah, where if you look at their seasonal visitation, it's pretty flat for 9 months. I mean, they reach its sort of maximum in March and it's sustained through November. Whereas for us, it's a very, very sharp peak. And that makes us very vulnerable to things such as wildfire coming in, certainly COVID, other, you know, infrastructure being impacted, like the Going to the Sun Road, late opening of the road, can really impact the visitor season, which of course tends to impact businesses, which tends to impact the local economy. And that's certainly something we saw with COVID this year. So yes, COVID response, we certainly were closed in March and April as much of the state was at that time. And certainly, you know, we were looking forward to a visitor season, trying to figure out what it would look like. And all these plans that we developed were all done at a period when the curve was pretty flat in Montana. Montana had done a pretty good job, and we had a pretty flat curve going into it. We developed this wonderful plan of sort of gradually opening the tap rather than just sort of turning it on full blast right away because of some of the limitations we had. April and May are the primary times when we bring on a lot of our seasonal employees. Housing restrictions, again, every employee had to have their own bedroom, which was something new and a challenge for us. We were limited in what we could provide for transportation systems. So we didn't have a shuttle system. We didn't have our red buses running. We didn't have our native tours running. Boat tours weren't running because of the ability to physical distance in those locations. So it really narrowed the visitor experience quite a bit as well. So, and that certainly had impacts on some of the things. But we developed this plan to be phased, you know, slowly rolling forward. And of course, you make the best, you know, you make your plans for the best possible situation, which really didn't occur. We never got to phase 3 in our plan because, of course, as the rest of the country started reopening and opening, you know, COVID infections went up, and we sort of had to hold off on opening new overnight accommodations, more of our campgrounds, things like this. And then, of course, we didn't anticipate that the entire east side of the park would be closed because of the concerns that the Blackfeet tribe, well-founded concerns, and we supported those concerns, of what an influx of so many out-of-state visitors would have on the Blackfeet tribe and their vulnerability to COVID infections. And so with half the park closed for the first time in history, we had to operate Glacier National Park as a one-way in, one-way out venue, which some of my peers would all laugh at me because, oh, we've been doing that for 100 years. But for Glacier, this was entirely new. For 100% of our visitors to come in and out the west entrance caused us a lot of headaches. We adapted our operation, but the numbers that came still overwhelmed the parking spaces we had. And so early on, we looked at implementing a ticketed entry system, which would have, instead of visitors getting turned around at the west entrance because all the parking was full and the park was close to gridlock, and finding out at the west entrance and being turned around, if we'd gone to a ticketed entry, we would have actually, people would have known ahead of time whether they were going to get in on their first day of their visit. So would have provided more certainty for our visitors going in. But because the season had already kicked in, it would have been quite an adjustment to sort of pull that off late in July. So we stepped away from ticketed entry, but you know, we certainly found that we were quite challenged later in the season when we saw some spikes in our visitation. Looking at so we had about half the visitation we normally would see in a given year. I think a lot of people heard with the east side closed, they decided not to come to Glacier. But still, even with 50% of normal visitation, that it created a normal level of activity or even higher level activity at some of our locations, like our west entrance, and even some of our trails. Our trails that were readily accessible were just as busy as they would be during a normal year. So that was very sort of interesting to us, and you know, trying to sort of think about sort of what is that looking like. This is a new data set that I became aware of this year. This is all based, I think, on cell phone data and people using geofencing technology and looking at where visitors are going, where people with cell phones are going. And this particular graph is about national parks and just shows how coming out of lockdown, popularity grew in July and early August, and then started tapering off, which is a fairly normal thing that we see. But then this huge jump at Labor Day, and we had that as well at Glacier. We had 6 days where we had to close the west entrance and turn people around. We had backups going down Highway 2 that were 2 or 3 miles long. Became a really difficult situation for our staff and very negative experience for a lot of our visitors. But it's just not the number of people who are coming to Glacier. It's also about who's coming to Glacier, what do they want to do. And you know, I've talked before about sort of this selfie culture suddenly coming to Glacier, and how their activities are a little bit different, and their preparedness for being in the backcountry or going on some of these long hikes. It's resulted in us implementing preventative search and rescue. But here in a COVID year, we think we saw something else. We saw, you know, a lot of people who needed to get out. Many of the normal places people go to, Canada, Mexico, you know, overseas travelers, everybody was focused on coming west and coming to national parks. And so we saw a lot of things this year that we haven't seen for quite a long time. And the amount of garbage people were leaving behind. Sal Rashid in Waterton told me it was amazing to see how much garbage people would leave right next to the garbage can. And it was almost as if they were afraid to open the garbage can to put the garbage in. And as a result, at Waterton, they had to put down a couple bears this year. Dogs on the trail. We saw a lot of dogs on the trail that we normally don't see in the park. Human waste was a large issue. A lot of our visitors don't seem to understand that you're supposed to, you know, bury your human waste. You're supposed to take your toilet paper with you. Just a lot of very, very basic things people didn't understand. And of course, social distancing, though now I'm told we're supposed to call it physical distancing, was also, you know, sort of a new element introduced by COVID. And really pushed us. We've always known we need to talk about a Leave No Trace 2.0, sort of going to that next level. This year really sort of brought it to a sharp point. We really need to address some very basic things about visiting our public lands to a lot of our visitors. And so, you know, an outgrowth of COVID this year, I think, was this Recreate Responsibly program, which was sponsored by equipment manufacturers, recreation associations, a lot of agencies, to integrate the Leave No Trace principles into some of this, you know, and try to address some of those really critical issues that you see a lot of, you know, and certainly distancing from wildlife. You know, we all seen the videos from Yellowstone, whether it's, you know, bison, you know, visitors getting too close to bison. But yeah, you know, this will be a very, very important, this education outreach component for the future is going to be even more important, because we understand that many of these travelers are going to be coming back to national parks, that they, you know, we've piqued their interest, and national parks are going to be a huge focus in the future. The Great American Outdoors Act, which was passed recently in the US side, I think really sort of mirrors what Canada's had and passed probably about 3 years ago, where Parks Canada had a huge infusion in funding for infrastructure, reducing deferred maintenance. A lot of the improvements made at Waterton were a result of that. We'll see something similar on the US side. Glacier I'm not sure it's going to address a lot of the things you see visibly at Glacier, because we put a lot of work already into the going to the Sun Road, the Many Glacier Hotel, some of our premier venues, Sperry Chalet. So we've accomplished a lot already, but the Great American Outdoors Act will address some of the critical infrastructure needs that we have for basic things like sewers and water systems. And again, many of these systems are being outstripped by the level of visitation that we're seeing. So, sweet spot of opportunity, I think, are some of these initiatives that we have going on in the Crown that are collaborative in nature. You know, we've had a history of working with the Blackfeet, certainly Leroy Little Bear and the work he's done through the Bison Treaty and the NE initiative that we have, transboundary effort to reestablish bison on the landscape. And we've been working with the tribe a lot on tourism. You know, what are the opportunities for tourism that we've always said in the Crown? Places like Glacier get an intense amount of use, but there's opportunities for other places to have some of that economic benefit on that. And so we've been working with the tribe on some of that. Unfortunately, COVID again brought to us in a situation we had to flip on its head, literally, and we had to sort of prevent visitors from coming to the reservation. And currently, there's a 14-day quarantine right on the park's doorstep in St. Mary and Bab, which is of great concern in terms of the impacts to the local communities there. So again, what we're seeing in this COVID year has brought, a lot of the efforts we've been working towards have brought them to a grinding halt. And it may take some time to sort of, once we get beyond COVID, it may take us some time to get back on track. I think one thing of being on the Crown Roundtable leadership team is this idea of the Crown. What is sustainable? What are robust initiatives that can do well, that will be sustainable over time? And I think I'll just talk briefly about the ANI initiative, which again is to bring back wild free-ranging bison to this shared landscape, transboundary landscape, north of the border, south of the border, in Glacier National Park, on the reservation. And it's something we've been working on. And I'm so passionate about this project because I think it is an example of sustainable initiative, that it has great conservation environmental benefits. It has great social or cultural benefits, and it's great community and economic benefits. And this is a mind map. This is a sort of a visualization tool of, what are we trying to accomplish in the ANI initiative? What is that sort of effort that just makes it more than just a one-off, or makes it more than just a conservation or environmental issue? And is the fact that it speaks so strongly to the cultural needs, the social needs of the Blackfeet people. It also speaks to economic opportunities, both on the reservation and in the park. And so it really sort of sits on a three-legged stool that makes it, I think, an example of what is sustainable. So how do we carry this over to outdoor recreation? How do we carry this over to tourism? I think is going to be really important if we want to have sustainable tourism, if we want to have sustainable recreation, is to think more broadly about this sort of three-legged stool moving forward. So, the future is hard to predict. And if you think of what it could look like, it may look like this, a huge number of scenarios. Really need to sort of think about this scenarically, and think about what are the things we would be doing today that are robust decisions we can make because they address a number of these scenarios. So our staffs and how we bring our workforce along is going to be important. And as you'll see throughout this rest of this discussion, is partnerships are key to this all, and working collaboratively on a large landscape is going to be important. So with that, I'll say thank you. And I know we're holding questions off until a little bit later.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. That was a fantastic presentation. Let's go ahead and give Jeff a virtual round of applause here. So if you can find your reactions button there at the bottom and give him a round of applause, I know that would be appreciated. Amazing to think about how full your plate was before COVID. And now it seems like a whole new reality, right? The impacts on the park and on the reservation that neighbors the park have really stood out to me as a real challenge, at least in the near term. But as you presented, a real opportunity on the horizon, especially if we can think about how to engage collaboratively through these partnership approaches that look across issues and jurisdictions. And then also that idea about thinking about cross-pollination of ideas, from maybe borrowing from the lessons of the ANI initiative or other conservation initiatives and translating some of that into the recreation arena. So lots of good stuff for us to think about. As Jeff mentioned at the end, we're going to ask you to put your questions for Jeff in the chat box, and we'll get back to those here near the end of this. And for now, we're going to turn back to our Crown Cafe format. So this is, again, your opportunity to share a quick update with one another about what's happening in your world. If you have an update you'd like to share, the easiest way to share that is by clicking the participants button at the bottom of your screen. That will bring up a participants window. And that should also at that time give you a list of buttons beneath everyone's name, one of which should say raise hand. So if you want to raise your hand, I can go ahead and call on you. Excuse me, I also got something in my throat here apparently. And if you want to just share an update in the chat box, you can also do that as well. So that's another opportunity. But we've got Juliet's hand raised here. Juliet, great to see you. If you want to go ahead and take off your mute button and say hi and share your update, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for organizing this. My name is Juliet Craig, and I'm the program manager for the Kootenay Conservation Program in southeastern BC. And I'm sitting in the traditional territories of the Ktunaxa and Sinixt Nations in Nelson, British Columbia. And I just wanted to give a few updates from KCP, from the Kootenay Conservation Program, that may be relevant in terms of working together collaboratively towards conservation. The first is we host conservation action forums. We've divided our region into 14 subregions or conservation neighborhoods. And we hold these interactive one-day forums and identified shared priorities for conservation. And we're hosting our 6th one coming up this fall. And we have tracked that 86% of the collaborative actions are all being worked on by our partners so far to date. Another one is Kootenay Connect, which is a landscape linkage initiative that we're focusing on important areas for connecting landscapes, grizzly bear populations, biodiversity hotspots, and climate refugia. It's based on the science of Dr. Michael Proctor and his grizzly bear research, and Marcy Marr with the Kootenay Conservation Program. And so they've identified these key areas that people can focus on for the most effective conservation measures. And we've also acquired significant federal funding to do species at risk work in 4 of these corridors. And the final one is a Stewardship Solutions Toolkit, which was a way to leverage all our partners that do outreach work or have messages about conservation for the general public, that they can go to one place based on those conservation neighborhoods, click on that, and all of the organizations that have outreach material will be on there with some key information. So all that can be found at kootenayconservation.ca, and I'll put that in the chat box. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Juliet. Great to hear about those updates. Scott Bischke, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, coming through loud and clear.
Okay, great, thanks. I'm Scott Bischke down in Bozeman. I do a number of things, including work as a science writer, including for the Montana Climate Assessment and now for the Climate Change and Human Health Report. I was lucky enough to be on the Governor's Council that Patrick so ably described. Thanks to him and Jeff both for their presentations. But I wanted to just quickly highlight that Climate Change and Human Health Report that should be coming out in the next couple of months. It includes topics, I'm just looking up to make sure I don't forget any, climate-related health impacts, those who are most vulnerable in our state to climate change impacts, and then actions that communities, individuals, and practitioners can take. So the MCA talked a great deal, the Montana Climate Assessment, about the science of climate change in our state, including the Crown, but across our state. As Patrick talked about, the science, the recommendations for action certainly come out of the Governor's Solutions Council. And then climate change and human health is now being really, really strongly tackled by a group that's led by the Institute on Ecosystems again, the Center for American Indian and Rural Health Equity, and Montana Health Professionals for a Healthy Climate. Again, for across the state, but also includes, and as recently as this morning, I was working on call outs for programs that are going on with the CSKT and Blackfeet Nation. So certainly a call out to the Crown as well. So I just wanted to let you all know about that. I don't see other folks except for, I believe Angelina is a contributor, but none of the other authors, not main authors, the other authors, and let you know that that'll be coming out in the next couple months. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that update, Scott. Really appreciated getting that firsthand from you and seeing your face. So thanks for being here. It's really nice to get the updates in person here. So if anyone else has any, we probably have time for one or two more. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and suggest that we put the updates in the chat box here. I know that just like in person when we run these conferences, we always over-program it and try to cram a lot of stuff into a short amount of time, and certainly trying to do that today, but it is great to have all these in-person updates. So as I'm talking here, just wrapping things up, if anyone else has something they'd like to share, please go ahead and raise your hand. We'll take maybe one more. But what we hope to demonstrate in part by doing the Crown Cafe is just this recognition that so many of us are holding different pieces of the puzzle, and that as we all come together in formats like this to share what's happening in our landscape with our organization, with our scholarship, it really does help inform all of us to do the work better. And so just be thinking about what is it that both you want to learn about, but what is it you have to share back to this community so that we can continue to learn and grow together. So I do see one more hand, and we'll go to Anthony Nelson next. And then after that, we're going to move back and do our speakers. So Anthony, if you'd like to take yourself off mute and share your update.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yep, coming through.
I think that is yes, great. Yeah, I just wanted to introduce myself really quick. I'm the director of the Glacier Institute here in Columbia Falls, Montana. And just wanted to say that I'm excited to be here. I've only been in this position since January. And for any of you listening that could see education being an important part in Glacier National Park of what you're trying to achieve, which is, I'm sure, a lot of you, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat box. And we are excited to partner with as many people as we can to get these important messages out and make sure that we're doing our part in educating people that are coming to Glacier National Parks. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks for saying hi, and good luck with the new position. It's great to have you.
Thank you.
Part of this community. Yeah. And I see Jono raised your hand too. If you've got a quick update, why don't you take yourself off mute and we'll close things out with your update. Jono.
Thanks a bunch, Sean. First of all, I do want to acknowledge Cliff Kipp from Montana Conservation Corps, who's also on here. And I just see Jed Sankar-Gordon, our staff up in Kalispell. You know, I just wanted to share, we are wrapping up a season as an AmeriCorps National Service Program, working in Glacier in the Crown. And it's been remarkably successful season despite the challenges of COVID. And it demonstrates the commitment of young people to engage, be part of the solution on these public lands, and being good stewards of the Crown. So we're looking forward to more opportunities to engage people. One of the challenges and disappointments for this year was that we needed to pause our great work with the Blackfeet Nation for the Pekani Lands Crew. We very much hope we'll be able to resume that next year, working with the Blackfeet Nation in partnership to engage young tribal members in stewardship of this ecosystem. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, no, thanks for joining and being a part of it and sharing that update. Also want to acknowledge the contributions in the chat box. So if everyone has a moment to hit the chat button and check those out. Thanks, Tara, for dropping in information about the Crown Landscape Conservation Design effort, and to Bonnie Harvey with the Kootenay Nation Council Education and Employment sector. So really good stuff coming into the chat box too. Please feel free to continue to share those contributions throughout today's symposium. With that, back to you, Melly.
Okay, thank you everybody for sharing. Thanks, Sean. So our next speaker has been a fantastic supporter and contributor to the Roundtable for many years. Dr. Leroy Little Bear was born and raised on the Blood Indian Reservation, the Kainai First Nation, about 70 kilometers west of Lethbridge. He was one of the first Native students to complete a program of study at University of Lethbridge, and Dr. Little Bear graduated in 1971 and went on to complete his Juris Doctor degree at the University of Utah. He then returned to his alma mater as a founding member of Canada's first Native American Studies Department. In the spring of 2003, Dr. Little Bear was awarded the prestigious National Aboriginal Achievement Award for Education, the highest honor bestowed by Canada's First Nations community. In 2016, he was awarded the Alberta Order of Excellence. In more recent years, Little Bear has been involved in bringing together the Buffalo Treaty, an agreement between First Nations in the United States and Canada to protect and restore bison herds to the wild. One of Leroy Little Bear's most significant and enduring legacies is his work with the United Nations, where he helped establish a working group on Indigenous populations. It was this working group that conceptualized and initially drafted the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. This declaration has since been ratified by 144 member states of the UN and is being implemented by the government of Alberta. Today, Dr. Little Bear will talk to us about rethinking our approaches to conservation and equity, a current hot topic. Welcome, Dr. Leroy Littlebear.
Thank you very much, Mel. Okay, nistuan na coke, ikas kinua. Zi konek sa matsinukpo nuk sistakoisk. My Blackfoot name is Lowhorn. Ikaskin, it's translated as Lowhorn after the buffalo. And my English name, of course, is Leroy Littlebear. I'm very honored to be invading your rooms and boardrooms and so forth, your spaces through all these cyber screens and so forth. So hello to all our participants. What I'm going to say, I've said a number of times to other audiences, and some of you have probably been in those audiences, and so it may sound like a broken record in terms of some of the things that I will say. I also want to let you know that I'm very much aware that I am going to be speaking to you as participants, or, you know, the converted, so to speak. And, you know, but we would like to encourage you to be the ambassadors of change, to act as change agents into the larger community, into our organizations, into our decision makers, whether they're in government, in our boardrooms, and so forth. Okay. So with that, I want to quote from an earlier presentation I had made to another audience with regard to the plains. And here's what I had said about that. The plains of North America are the most environmentally interfered with as far as ecosystems go. Why? Well, because of agriculture. If there had been a little more relational approach, and if we can repeat that, a little more relational approach, there may have been a whole lot less environmental and ecological damage done to the plains. Okay. And the reason is because most people think that, hey, estimates are that there used to be 16 million, maybe more, of buffalo out on the plains at one time. How come those 60 million bison did not do great damage to the plains? Say, how come? Well, that's because there was a relational approach between those animals and others of their kind and the human beings that were on the land, on the Great Plains. Say, that was the reason why. Say, so the point I'm wanting to make is that our Western approach to how we do things, to a large extent, our science is based on this now starting to be dated. You know, it's kind of dated, and COVID-19 is proving that to us. A measurement approach to our science. Everything is about measurement. Everything is about numbers. See, I used to laugh a number of years ago going to university. I don't even have to give them my name. I just give them an ID number, you know? And think of how many numbers you and I have come to be. You know, we're just numbers. See, that's what we've come to be as a result of that way of approaching science, our way of approaching things is that numbers approach. Okay, so the challenge to our sciences and consequently our approach, the challenge to our conservation approach to the crown of the continent, and for that matter, to the whole issue and area of conservation is the reconciliation of measurement and relationship. In other words, Western science is about measurement. The native science is about relationship. So our challenge is to reconcile those two fundamental approaches to science so that we can open new science doors. See, if we were to bring those two together, we will open new science doors, because using only one door has limits, and we're starting to run into no new doors. We're starting to run into walls now. So that's you know, one of the things we have to think about. Let me relate this to the whole notion about, as Jeff has been pointing out in his wonderful presentation, with regard to how they were approaching and the tourism aspect, you know, in Glacier National Park, and it's not much different on this side of the border. Let me relate this to the whole issue about COVID-19. We normally give no thought to how fragile is the complex network that sustains our life, until the day a little creature of microscopic dimensions, one of the most elementary forms of life, erupted into our well-organized world and confronted us with the essential truth of our frailty, of our impermanence, of our being just a link in the great chain of life. It is a powerful lesson. In other words, a little microscopic thing. You know, that little virus has gripped all of the whole global scene. Okay? Well, the powerful lesson to be learned is that the zoonotic transmission of diseases, that is the diseases that are transmitted between humans and animals, are increasingly linked to the environment and human beings. And the behavior, more specifically, of human beings. The disruption of natural environments by logging, mining, road building through remote places, rapid urbanization. Just think of cities bragging about reaching certain population limits, is bringing people into closer contact with animal species that we generally don't come across on a daily basis. And the resulting transmission of these diseases from wildlife to humans now is a hidden cost of human economic development. And that's what Pat Holmes was talking about. That's what Mike was talking about. These developments, these mining and so on that are now taking place and so forth. See, that's going to displace those animals, and it's going to cause increasing, closeness and transmission of diseases between humans and so on. So it's not just going to be limited to COVID-19, it's going to result in other types of diseases also being transmitted. So that is that type of exchange, that type of deal is the normal that our governments, whether it's the state of Montana, whether it's the province of Alberta or British Columbia, that's the normal they're wanting us to return to. And they're spending billions of dollars. They're throwing billions of dollars, to get us back to that normal. When in reality, it's that normal that is the problem. So, the thing is, it would be we would have a very different response if there were to be a relational response to COVID-19 than simply counting the number of people that are being tested. In other words, just counting numbers. So when we are isolating ourselves, it would be a good idea if we can rethink how we approach our science, how we approach the whole notion of conservation. Now, that's the reason why 2014, our elders were realizing that That's the reason why they said, we need to bring the buffalo back. The reason for the buffalo, that animal is so keystone to our relationship to the rest of the environment, so that we can have that ecological relationship that's more balanced. That's what the Buffalo Treaty is about. The Buffalo Treaty is not just about the buffalo itself. The buffalo is about ecological balance. So, going back to the environmental damage done to the plains by agriculture, if we don't watch out, and if we don't really, if we're not very careful, what has happened to the plains is what's going to happen to the crown of the continent, with all this mining, road building, and so forth. So we have to be careful. And consequently, hey, those animals are going to be displaced, and we're going to have more COVID-19s or whatever number we may assign to them. So let's rethink our science. Let's rethink our conservation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Little Bear. Let's give him a reaction, hand clapping from your reactions button. Fantastic words of wisdom that you're sharing with us. And I think it is a unique perspective on the importance of healthy landscapes and how that is dependent to have healthy community, dependent on having healthy communities. So thank you so much. I'm going to move ahead to Mike Brewstead, who is our next speaker. Mike Brewstead currently acts as the chairman of the Kainai Ecological Protection Agency. Previously a council member, Mike was also employed with the Kainai Board of Education as a high school teacher and principal. He's presented papers on Indigenous topics at several World Indigenous Peoples Conferences on education, including those in Australia, Hawaii, and Peru. Mike has participated in cultural and environmental documentaries, as well as many Blackfoot ceremonies. He's currently working on his PhD from the University of Lethbridge, having received his master's from Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington. Today, Mike will talk to us about mountains and water from the Blackfoot perspective. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much, Melly. I'm going to try and do a screen, share screen. And this is my own documentary I'm trying to do. It's not professional, may make people dizzy. I'll shoot it. It's actually a 20-minute thing, but I'll do maybe 5 or 6 minutes, and then I'll explain what I'm doing. And so I'm going to try and bring it up, and I'll let myself talk. I'll let myself talk, and okay, Forrest, okay, let me just bring that back a bit. All right, and I'm gonna lower it because I think it's a little bit too loud. Can you still hear me?
We can hear you, Mike, but we don't see your film. We see your
Okay, let me try again. I was having problems with it earlier. Can you see it now?
No. Is it on a different screen, maybe?
No, it should be on there. I had problems earlier with it. Let me try again. Okay, is it on? Is it on? No?
It's
Not
it's
yet,
not
no.
Mike. This is Sean, Mike. If you go
Okay,
to,
Sean, walk me through this.
I think you need to stop sharing your current screen. So go ahead and stop share.
Okay, stop.
And then hit your screen share button again at the bottom, the green.
Yep. Okay.
And that brings up your different fields, right?
Okay. And
do you have your movie open in one of those windows?
yeah, it's open now.
Okay, so try clicking on that and hit share and see if that works. That looks good.
Great,
Is
thanks.
it on?
Yes.
Okay. Or I'll start it in about 5 or 6 minutes and I'll explain what I'm doing after that. Okay, I will begin. Okay. It's August 29th, second day. I'm at the BB Flats timber limits. Okay, nito na ko ninapix. Ano sita po kita kakakyo? Okay, mo nitay. Ano mo bubuan sitay? Okay, so gisi mi stakis. Gisi mi stakis andisto. Okay, kistinni ko mo nitay. Ano, nilapitang oh, yo, mimista ko. Ano skop ni stop sa pa. O chinchka semua. O kanik suka, tama. O kanik suka. Mo kon stop eh. Tayo ka mo sinupos. This suppose. Kanik suka, tama. Okay, nakita isine pa amit sinika. Nikak suka. Okay. Ognito ogninas. Good afternoon. This is Mike. August 29, scene 2. I am by the North Fork Valley River, and the flat you see there, call it the timber limits or BB flat, and the where we chop wood, wood for teepee poles, for logs, for fire. There's an old camping area right here across this flat, and so a lot of history here. And so these mountains, we have a very unique relationship. Why we fast in these mountains. No other culture and probably no other tribe has really fasted here from ancient times. And we say mountain spirits. And so you will not hear that term in any other culture, except those indigenous cultures that respect the land and the creation of these mountains. And so people talk about Ice Age. There's starting to be artifacts and bones found before and after Ice Age in this area. And so these mountains have a wealth of knowledge and history. And so this is what the story, this journey I'm on is all about. And so you see the connectivity of the water, of the rocks, of the trees, the animals, the birds. It's all one, from ground up to the universe. Just like those clouds in the sky. We are of one, and we are mere human beings. We can never conquer these mountains. In fact, they will conquer us. And it's only very, very powerful moments, experiences where we name a mountain after a person that is very unique. We do not put our names as the early map makers, our colonial impact. We don't do that. We respect the mountains. The mountains have been here way before us, and they will be here long after us. So the stories and the language and the names of trees, these mountains, these animals, and only those birds that flourish here in these mountains. And so maybe it's not unique what I'm saying, why I call it Blackfoot Mountain language, because of the culture of our people from long ago that we're teaching our children, our grandchildren. I'm not the first one to have traveled through here, and I won't be the last. This is where the bear, the spirit of the bear, the buffalo that's gone now, that used to roam. This water you see comes from the south, from the Glacier Park. This is the North Fork Valley River. And itself, it has a story. And it meets to the south. Over here is the short distance. Downstream, it meets the South Fork and forms the Valley River, Mukoansi. Even the word Mukoansi, the belly, that term came from the lake of a glacier now in Glacier Park. The belly, the bottom part of the glacier, the bottom area of the mountain where the water and ice collected for thousands of years. And so this river's been flowing during that time. And some of the stories, they make reference to monsters, to dinosaurs. And so, like I always say, if the land can talk, we would really know just how much we don't know. And so the history has to be corrected. And from that of the colonial history, because that eroded our way of life, our language, our culture, our hunting. And so to revitalize language, which makes us the unique people we are, by renaming these mountains, it created an erosion, a domino effect of the history here. Way before national parks, way before Dominion Lands Protection Act of 1884, before Thomas Blakiston. And so we need to come back and acknowledge my people that have been here for thousands of years. There are artifacts being found that are around 9,000 and 10,000 years old, old historical sites. And so imagine the voice of my grandchildren. Imagine it used to be abundant in this area. And now we spend short time. We are almost foreigners to our own mountain lands because of government policy. And imagine in 1884, that really eroded our freedom when the Indian Act and the Indian agents of the day enforced a permit to leave the flood reserve reserve number 148A, which is northeast of here, called the Blood Indian Reserve. And so that we lost our language. So, can you hear me, everybody?
Sounds good, Mike.
So, at least how much time I got? 5 minutes left. I did the first part all in Blackfoot, old Blackfoot, as if I was addressing the ancestors or the elders. And you know, with the park system, wonderful thing. But it also created that isolation for us in Waterton. And I made mention of Chief Mountain in Aspen. Well, right now, the signage in Waterton National Park, named after a person that never set foot in Waterton from Britain, from the Royal Geographical Society, Sir Charles Waterton, by his friend Thomas Blakiston. And so in 1884, we weren't allowed to leave the reservation. And that created distance in and severed our relationship with the mountains. I've got 8 of these little self videos, documentary, and I'm going to pull it together. And I've got a professional. I tried to do it cheap because he's too expensive, my friend. Last week, 2 Fridays ago, actually, I rode 30 kilometers from Red Rock Canyon to towards Sage Pass, and had a quick lunch and another video up at Upper Middle or Twin Lake, and then climbed the mountain. That's the highest I ever rode a horse, up part of Balderson Mountain. Pretty steep climb on horse, and even somebody was walking, and then over the other side. And we got pretty close to South Kootenay Pass. And again, we have our own Blackfoot names, but the park has it mapped up like that. And coming around and coming back to Blakiston Creek, Blakiston Falls, etc., back to the trailer. 7.5-hour ride. And it's almost like riding from Bath, Montana to pretty near Browning. And so my point is, during that ride, you know, something came alive. I put tobacco and got on a horse. We headed out. We all prayed before we got on the horse. 3 or 4 things happened. One, I sang an honor song to the old people, an old song. I'd say about 5-10 minutes, there was this warm sensation on my back, and everybody looked backwards as if something was on our back, a good feeling. It's like something embracing me. And I figured, oh, hey, the Fiscal, that there's spirits here, or something here. And we kept riding. And I got this other part on video when I was videotaping right by the Upper Twin Lake and talking about Sage Pass. There was a shadow of a great big eagle, and yet we couldn't see the eagle even towards the sun behind the trees, right in the middle of the lake. These 2 guides I've written several times, they've never had that experience. And so one of them asked me, did you call these out? And I said, yes. That is what I'm trying to tell people, that our relationship with Mistakis, the spirits of the mountains, they're not just sitting there to be climbed, you know, and somebody feels they're concrete. Anyways, as we're coming down, you know, I kept seeing things. I figured maybe I'm riding too long in the hot sun. First, I saw old people in the switchbacks, all they call them ghost trees now, the white trees. I saw people walking. Look there, they're gone. And my brother and his nephew, they took the lead then, and still going down, descending. Next thing I saw horses with no rider. And I didn't want to tell the two non-native people, hey, I'm seeing stuff here in case they think I'm crazy. And so I never said anything. I just thought, gee, oh, people must have gone through these two trails, Sage Pass and South Kootenay, and we're pretty close. We were going to go up there, but it was too steep for the horses, and we're running out of time before the sun set. And so those experiences is what I talk about in Blackfoot. Our relationship with the river, Moko and Sit, that starts on Jeff's side, Glacier Park, the Belly River. And so that is, we talk about a lot of science. Well, I don't know if you see a shadow of an eagle on a glassy lake. That sure isn't science. And then every time on my video, when I talk about Nitsitapi, and even in English, the ancestors, a warm breeze would come up through us. We all looked at each other like almost, it wasn't winded at all. There's no wind. 3 times this warm breeze. That ain't science. Seeing things walking from the past and riding horses, that ain't science. So I never said anything. So when we loaded up the horse, I thought, okay, Blackiston. Blackiston Mountain is Pinakoye, seen from afar. That's our Blackfoot name. And my journey is to give those mountains their rightful Blackfoot names. So far, 18. And this is with the help of the elders and a lot of people. We're driving back. I phoned my brother, horse trailer. Did you see anything? And he said, geez, his son, Will, was telling him he heard voices because they created a little distance on the switchbacks. And he's got a fast walking horse, my brother. And Will is a cowboy. He's those kind that something amazed him because he usually doesn't talk like that. And then where I saw the horses following him, Bill heard just a silent drum and people singing. And it goes back to what I'm saying, why I said all this in Blackwood in the beginning. And so maybe I'm the last or the first one in modern times to ride a horse up there. 18 miles, 30 kilometers, that's like from Standoff to Fort McLeod or Standoff to Carson. That's how far we rode or I rode. And I think not necessarily using the word we woke up somebody, but I think we connected. If they're 10,000-year-old spirits, 8, whatever, there's still old ancestors there. And so I'm doing a doctorate. 1 more year to go, and I'm supposed to defend my doctorate, not my advisor, but a different panel of scholars in Euro-Western education thought. They probably use Marxist theories, Maslow's, whatever. I'm supposed to tell them that this is what I experienced and you'll see it in that. And they're going to tell me, well, that's not good enough for a thesis. Well, I'm going to tell them, yeah, because your way of thesis thinking is way over down here. My thought is up here, so I don't care if you accept it. It's my elders. If they go like this or like this, that's who I'm doing this for. And the mountain language, all the birds, and there's about 4 to 6 medicinal plants that only grow in the mountains. 2 you only pick in the morning. The rest is towards the evening. And the elder told me, you don't just all run out and pick them up like that. And so the morning I thought about it when the sun comes over the mountains, and these 6 plants don't grow in the foothills or in the prairies. They don't. And different different ailments, you know, that they have. And so that is my presentation from a Blackfoot perspective on water and mountains and our relationship. And imagine I've got 7 more 20-minute presentations. After this, I say a lot more, but due to time, I didn't want to show it, but that's my presentation to you. And that, like Dr. Little Bear says, think about the story and balance it with science, Western science. Mine wasn't even scientific, and yet the experience is so overwhelming. Maslow and Marx theories don't even come close at all. And this is for real. I wish I could start a third form of post-secondary education. You got vocational training, college, university, and how universities are structured. I would like to start a third form of a university, or whatever we're going to call it, that starts from real things to maybe we need to have theory and concept, or just stay at realism, real things, you know, because I think the young people and how universities are structured, you know, the closest we have, imagine, is environmental science, conservation classes. That's the only thing in there. So I just want to end there, and thank you very much. I appreciate the Crown. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope I didn't take too long. Thank you for listening to me. On.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. So let's give Mike a round of applause. If you want to find your reactions button there at the bottom and give him a round of applause. Really thought that was a fantastic presentation, and it paired so nicely with Dr. Little Bear's presentation, where he was introducing this idea of Western science being about measurement, native science about relationship, and how we might think about reconciling those two, blending those two, leveraging those so that we can open new scientific doors. And so where you ended there, Mike, I think was contemplating what that new scientific door might look like within the university setting, which I think would be fantastic to explore. So we are just a little bit over our scheduled time here, but I do want to make time for a couple of questions for those that can stay for another 10 minutes. And I personally have to jump at 3:15 as well. So I think that'll end up being when I have to leave, but if others can stay on, you're certainly welcome to. A lot of the questions that came through on the chat really were focused about what comes next. And so I'm gonna start at the top with a question for Patrick, if you're still here. Patrick, it was a question about really moving forward. How will the policies and the recommendations established during Governor Bullock's tenure and in the report that you shared today, how do those move forward? You know, we've got an election coming up here. You talked about this network of folks that may be able to continue to provide input and advice to whoever comes next and to the next legislature. But really, how do you see this moving forward into implementation?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Sean, and for those who posed that question in the chat. I should have mentioned that implementation of a lot of the work that the Governor's Council put together and the recommendations they offered has to occur at a variety of different levels. Certainly there are opportunities for the Governor as the Chief Executive and the executive branch to show leadership among the recommendations with their implementation. But there are also places where we are looking to the legislature to, in many cases, business partnerships with the university system, partnerships with our communities and tribal nations to further implementation. And for those reasons, it's an effort that's going to need to be pursued at a number of different avenues for implementation. And part of why we're calling on others to help join us in that work and those efforts. Certainly there are places right now where the state government under Governor Bullock's leadership is looking to take the baton from the council and begin that work around implementation with hopes of taking significant steps forward ahead of the end of the term. But there's also a broad recognition that ultimately we're going to have to transition much of this work to an incoming governor and to a range of different partners, both in the legislature and beyond. So we're thinking about those strategies and certainly looking to to engage in our relationships around the state and the region to help further a lot of this work.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Really appreciate that perspective and that answer. Certainly there's a lot that you guys are doing there within the governor's office, but holding one piece of it, of a complex issue, really does require you to think beyond those boundaries and who can hold different pieces of this puzzle and carry those elements forward. So great to hear that it's moving in all those different directions. Jeff, there was a question for you too that in some ways is both reflective of the moment but looking to the future, and it was about whether or not this time of COVID and some of the challenges it's presented has provided the park and your partners with any kind of silver lining moments. And this was particularly directed at maybe some ecological health or rebounding that could have happened during some closures or shutdowns. And then how do you balance anything like that that may have been a benefit for ecological health with some of the pressures that you're seeing around the tourism objectives that you shared? So,
sure.
Have any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, quite honestly, what we're doing today is an example of perhaps a silver lining out of COVID that it might have been a few more years until we actually sort of mastered this idea of how to do things virtually. So, I often use, our use of Zoom and, other platforms to work virtually as a silver lining, but, maybe it's just the new normal that we look at. And so if we translate that to what we're seeing with resources, and certainly I've heard from staff about, the campgrounds that haven't had anybody in them all summer, how they're changing, many Glacier Valley, the handful of folks that live there, how the wildlife are behaving differently. It is something for us to sort of look at and monitor and think about. And again, will there be a normal that sees things to what we did last year? It's hard to tell, but yeah, I think we're certainly monitoring that. We're documenting it as best we can, and thinking about what are those things that we've learned this year? How do we incorporate them in the future? Honestly, I can't say we've had the full time, and usually it takes the winter for us to sort of take measure of that. We're doing a number of efforts to sort of capture what our staff saw, what did they see, what's different, what do we incorporate into the future. So I think a lot of that is yet to be played out and understood moving forward. So that's the best I can do, I think, on that one.
No, that's great. It is certainly a time for reflection and looking for those silver lining opportunities, and to think about how do we incorporate all the things that we're learning during this time into our future oriented activities and projects. So appreciate those thoughts from your perspective, Jeff. That was really helpful. So I'm going to start moving us towards the end here. If anyone does have a burning question that they want to pose, you're still welcome to throw something into the chat or throw up your hand there in the sidebar, and I'll look for it. But really want to thank everyone for joining us today. Certainly want to thank our speakers again. So Patrick Holmes, Jeff Mao, Mike Brewstead, Dr. Leroy Littlebear, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your deep experience and wisdom with us. I want to just thank everyone for being here today too. It's always fun to connect in the Crown Roundtable in person. I think today was not quite as fun, but certainly in the spirit of everything that we've done in the past. We had 90 participants join live in the moment. We had another 45 people register. So people will be looking to this in the future as another way for us to connect and learn across the region. Of course, nothing like this happens on its own. So I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Kendra Hoff at the Center for Large Landscape Conservation, who did so much getting this set up and has served as the Roundtable's coordinator this past year. Melissa Batinsky as well from the Center for Large Landscape Conservation, who mastered today's technology and really helped shepherd us through this conversation in a way that I think really did work well. As Melly said, our Roundtable leadership team is just an awesome, devoted volunteer group of people who keep this conversation going from year to year. I want to thank everyone who serves on that team for everything that you commit to this region and to each other on an annual basis. It really is a fun place to exchange information, build relationships, and really think about how we can collectively shape the future of this landscape that we all care so much about. Just a couple of quick updates on things that the Roundtable is doing. You saw a note in the chat box from Elena about a potential exchange opportunity with some folks in Russia that are interested in thinking about how does climate adaptation at the regional scale play out and what can we learn from each other. So there's lots of interest in exchange opportunities, both within and beyond the region. You saw today during the Crown Cafe just how exchanging information amongst ourselves can be really valuable and useful in learning more about what's happening. During this time of COVID, I think one of the silver linings for the Roundtable leadership team has been our work to reflect on what we've been able to accomplish together over the last 10 years, where we've made a difference and what we might be thinking about as we look forward to the next 10 years. And so we've put together a little bit of an evaluation team to think about, well, what is our story and where is it going? And we want your input on that. You know, thinking about what are the opportunities for the Roundtable, where has it added value for you and your organization and your community, and where might we go from here? So one of the things to be on the lookout for is an upcoming email from us with a few questions that invites you to be a part of that conversation and share your perspective. So with that, just a lot of gratitude for everything that all of you contribute to your communities and to this landscape on a day-to-day basis. Please do keep in touch and you know, be in contact. You can use our website as a way to be in touch, and that's just crownroundtable.net. We're also looking for ways to support this conversation moving forward. So if anyone has the means to provide a small donation, there is a donation opportunity on the website now available. So with that, I will say thanks so much. Be well, take good care, and do please keep in touch. Thanks all.